Oki, ni Sokoax, ni sto anokok natibiksi. My English name is Kendrick Fox. My Blackfoot name translates to Holy Hitter, which was given to me by my great grandfather, Mukakin, or Pat Weaselhead, when I was about a month old. I'll get to the story on how I received the name and usually just naming in general. Um, I am the First Nations Metis Inuit Support Worker at Father Leonard Van Tighem and St. Joseph's School since October of 2017. Prior to that, I was a supervisor with a Blood Tribe agriculture project for, I'd say about 7 years. Prior to that, I was a petroleum land administrator with Enerplus Resources in Calgary. I guess just kind of keeping in the theme of the month of November and why I guess I'm on the newsletter. It's very humbling, and I thank everyone that kind of asked for me to be on here. Um, so I am a Afghanistan veteran. I served with the 2nd Battalion Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry from the year 2000 to the end of the year of 2003. I served one tour, the first tour of the Afghan War. I was a part of the group that kind of made history at the time. So before I really jump into there, I'll just kind of rewind myself and kind of how I kind of walked the journey I did, being a veteran and I guess being a support worker and just kind of keeping our traditional knowledge and giving that to our students. So I'm not going to go back to when I was born, but when I was 16 years old, I was at Catholic Central High. My mother was at the University of Lethbridge, and she would always tell me, take your books with you. We're going to the library. I don't care what you do. If you don't have homework, you can sign something out and read. And at that time, I was kind of starting to question, I was 16 and wanted to know traditionally what Blackfoot people or Blackfoot males did to enter from, I guess, boyhood into manhood. What was that step, if there was one? And I started asking around for elders, but nobody really pointed me in the right direction, or I just didn't know who to ask. So I did the very next best thing, and I started signing out books from the library and reading up on all of these old famous Blackfoot warriors. Starting from seen from afar all the way down to Mike Mountain Horse of World War One, and just being amazed at their stories and I guess the romanticism of being a warrior. So that was kind of what set me into that trajectory. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my ancestors. And usually they said at a young age of 16, 17, traditionally a Blackfoot boy would, tag along and be an apprentice to a warrior, and they would go on a raiding party or a war party, and he would learn his skills, and that would be the first step of him becoming a warrior. And as he progressed through those, he would have certain coups and and stories and rights that were bestowed upon him, from doing those deeds. So it would be illegal to go on a war party against a tribe. So I did the next best thing, and I joined the military. I joined the Canadian Armed Forces in July of 2000, and started off with the reserve basic training, Bold Eagle. Did my 8 weeks, and I loved every minute of it, and signed up for the regular force, and and then started my training right away in November. end of November 2000. Um, I graduated top candidate of my class for basic training for regular force. I was top third in battle school, infantry battle school right after. And, when we were, our graduation ceremony was at the beginning of August of 2001. We were given a couple weeks, of leave after our training before we were sent to our battalions. The battalion I was sent to was the 2nd Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. Um, when we landed there, we were sent off pretty much right away and told to report back 3 weeks later. I landed on the Sunday coming back from leave. Monday and Tuesday was pretty much we were exchanging old equipment that we were given in battle school for new equipment now that we were trained soldiers. And the Tuesday morning, I remember carrying a bag of brand new kit, and other soldiers started pulling up and asking what we were issued and if we heard the news and to report to our platoons. So we had no idea what was going on. That was the morning of September 11th. So my second day as a trained soldier, we were, already on alert. We were sent to the airport in Winnipeg, and we had to unload all these planes being rerouted out of the United States because there was no fly zone at the time. Within a week, we were scrambling. There was a call that went out from the 3rd Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, that they were a company or 125 men short to have their battalion ready. They were Canada's quick response force at the time. So the 2nd Battalion had a tryout for the battalion or for a company that was going to join them. I made the company, made that list, and we were attached with them right away when we were put on 48 hours notice to move. I found myself in Afghanistan March of 2002, at the beginning of March 2002, and took part in the very first combat operation that Canada was on at the time since the Korean War. So it was very, very surreal. I remember going there very excited, and romanticizing war, but landing there and seeing casualties from the Americans, it made things very real for me, and it was a very scary experience. I served as a company scout that first mission. We were on Operation Harpoon, so that was my first mission. I served 4 missions after that. There was certain deeds that I did in there that I usually share in traditional ceremonies, just because that's the place to be able to release some of those things where it helps me as an individual, where I can deal with it. When I got back, I did have my struggles with it, just trying to process. I was 19 at the time, and just trying to process of everything that I had went through. So it was a very long kind of journey for my health and wellness, and a lot of self-care needed to take place. But I think where it really took off was when I got back, the elders were the ones to come and find me. But like I said prior, I wanted to find elders, but they found me when I got back, and I was captured into the Horn Society when I was 30 years old, and I was able to release a lot of the negative things from war through that society. But in return, I was also able to get a lot of traditional knowledge passed on down to me, and just from reading all their books, and for to hear this stuff firsthand that has been passed down orally for thousands of years, it was very healing. So I was in the Horn Society until a couple of years ago. So I was in there for about just over 6 years. Um, now I'm considered a father of the Horn Society, and on my path to becoming, I guess, what would you call an elder or a grandfather. Um, so it's very humbling to be kind of in, following my ancestors' footsteps, exactly kind of how I set out when I was 19, you know, by serving my country, and then having that come back. And I think it really didn't hit me until I actually read a book by James Dempsey. Um, so the book that kind of sent me off to war was I read Charcoal's World, written by Hugh Dempsey. So there was a book I was reading by James Dempsey, that's Hugh's son, and it was called Blackfoot War Paint or Blackfoot Paints. I don't know the title off my head right now, but it was just explaining a lot of the designs with Blackfoot symbols, and then even when they go for war, and how they would mark that down. So as I was reading this book, James actually had a brief kind of rundown from all of these warriors that I used to read when I was 16, and just their deeds and everything like that. And he started getting down to Mike Mountain Horse, and then the honors that Mike did in World War One by capturing a German battery, and that was a big feat in itself. And the very last story, he doesn't have a name, but he says a young soldier, was sharing a story, and I was reading the story, and it was my story. There was little details mixed up, but it was my story, and I kind of got choked up a lot from that story, where it was kind of hit me. I set out myself at a young age to follow in the footsteps of my ancestors, and you know I wanted to follow in the footsteps of those great warriors that became great chiefs and whatnot, and to be even mentioned in the same breath of them in a book is, even though it's not my name, but my story was, it was very humbling, and I kind of got choked up a little bit from just reading that. So that's kind of my thing. So kind of going back to my Blackfoot name, um, my grandfather Mukakin, he was very instrumental of keeping, our spirituality and our ways alive. When everyone thought that they were going to die out, that he was very instrumental in that. So when I was named, I was a month old, and I had just been baptized at church, and we were having a meal that evening, and how the story goes was, my mother went up to him and asked for a Blackfoot name, and he just said, his name is Itsinika'si, Holy Hitter. So nobody knew the story, and I asked my entire life. Mukakin had passed away when I was about 4 months old, so I never knew him personally. My grandmother never knew the story. My mother never knew the story. It wasn't until I was in the Horn Society when I was sitting at a sweat lodge, and one of the grandfathers or elders was sitting there, and he said, Natibiksi. And I turned, he said, that's your name, right? And I said, yes. He said, who gave you the name? And I told him, and he said, do you know the story? And I said, no. He smiled at me, and he said, I know the story. So the grandfather who told me was Bunagak. He told me the story was Mukakin had a friend from the Crow Reservation in Montana, and traditionally the Crow and the Blackfoot or Bloods were enemies. So he had a friend from the Crow Reservation, and he was invited down to their Crow Fair. So he went down, and he was sitting there and playing hand games, and where their hand games was, behind them they had their Sundance site with all their holy objects that they had offered. And Mukakin got up with his cane and he walked over to those holy objects and he started beating them and hitting them. And everybody there that was Crow stood up in shock, and they were running over to rush Mukakin when his friend started laughing and he stopped all of them and he just said, "We're traditional enemies. He's counting coup on us. He's capturing us. He's counting coup on us. We're going to give that to him." So when I was given the name, my name was that holy hitter. It was a coup name of counting coup on traditional enemies. So, it was only fitting for me to go off to war and have my own coups take place, and to be able to have that luck and to walk in those footsteps when I never knew the story of it. So that's kind of ends of, you know kind of perfectly of just being able to kind of walk in my ancestors' shoes in today's world. Thank you.